And this morning, we're ending with a special honor to one of the most prolific voices in American opera. Take a look. Marian Anderson was an American contralto, performing a range of genres from opera to spiritual. Hailing from Philly, Anderson overcame racial and economical boundaries to become one of the most highly acclaimed vocalists of the 20th century. Her talent earned her a scholarship to train abroad, where in 1935, she earned worldwide recognition for her performance in Salzburg. When she returned to the U.S., she became one of the first African Americans to perform at the White House. But when Anderson was denied the use of Constitution Hall due to racist policies on Easter Sunday in 1939, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt opened the Lincoln Memorial for her performance, which went down in history as one of the most dramatic civil rights spectacles ever. Anderson went on to become the first African-American soloist at the Metropolitan Opera and was given the position of Goodwill Ambassador by the State Department. Anderson sang the national anthem at President John F. Kennedy's inauguration, who later gave her the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We salute Marian Anderson and her ability to spread goodwill through incredible music. We'll be right back.